Major new developments in the deadly police shooting of Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. The Justice Department today leveling federal charges against 4 current and former officers connected with her death. Among the charges, officers are accused of falsifying documents to obtain the search warrant of her home where she was shot and killed. Then they're accused of lying to cover it up.
This video is brought to you by TatumReport.com. TatumReport.com. Ladies and gentlemen, you can support TatumReport.com. We got all the best articles that you can find right here. You got the email list. You can join the email list. If you want to support through a donation, just hit this tab right here at the top. But you need to know about Breonna Taylor. They just arrested 4 officers connected in Breonna Taylor's case on a federal level. They want to say that they violated her constitutional rights, or at least her civil rights. And all the evidence is here. It's right here. You have to look no further. I don't care what they say. The evidence is here. Breonna Taylor was involved. Click on this link. You'll see it. I'll put the link in the description section. Like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so you get notifications anytime I go live or make a video. You know what to do. Let's get into this. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. The Justice Department, and I don't believe they're justice at all. The Justice Department charged 4 Louisville police officers in Breonna Taylor's investigation. It says that the FBI arrested former Louisville police officer Joshua James. That was on Thursday. And then also current police officer Sergeant Kyle Meany, Detective Kelly Goodlett, and former Detective Brett Hankinson. Now, let me tell you what the charges are. The charges are for civil rights violation of conspiracy and falsifying records and statements on to federal investigators. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland announced on Wednesday. Now, I have a theory behind this to a certain degree, and I'll say this. I had to issue an apology to Brett Hankinson because I was very upset with how he handled the Breonna Taylor shooting. He was shooting through the windows and stuff, and he ended up getting charged, but he was let off. And I made an apology because after it was explained to me his thought process, I felt that he may have been acting in good faith, although that was probably not the right decision, the way he went about it. Now, this is a thing that I think it's a witch hunt, but I think they have merit here to a certain degree, because there were some statements on the affidavit that were not accurate in the Breonna Taylor's investigation. Now, they had a whole slew of stuff to put Breonna Taylor in prison, and also all the other people who are co-conspirators, which she was more of a co-conspirator than everybody else, because the main guy was Jamarcus Glover, and he was the main thug, and they arrested him with the SWAT team at the trap house. They had simultaneous warrants for multiple locations. Breonna Taylor's house was one of them. According to sources that I have, it was a mix-up of words that did not need to be put into the warrant, right? I think they mentioned that there was surveillance that was confirmed by the post office, when actually there was surveillance that was had that was enough to get a warrant, but they added in confirmed by the post office. Now, I guarantee you their defense is going to be that it was a mix-up of communication, right? Somebody told them that they verified and it wasn't verified, so they wrote it in the search warrant. I don't think that they should be found guilty. I don't think that they will be found guilty, but this is a witch hunt. Breonna Taylor is dead for one reason. Her boyfriend shot the police and they fired back, and she took a L. That's what happened. On the Tatum Report, TatumReport.com, which is my online news network, TatumReport.com, we have a 40-page document of the investigation into Breonna Taylor. So if you're concerned or you have any questions, all you got to do is go to TatumReport.com, and you can put in Breonna Taylor case, and you will see 40-page document, exclusive document that we have, jail records, everything. All you can eat information on Breonna Taylor. Hold the phone. I'll be back after the break. But the investigation into the officers involved in the Breonna Taylor case, we were talking about in the last segment, they may have some merit here to a certain degree. It wasn't completely a clean warrant when you go back and look at it. However, the portion of the warrant that's in question wouldn't have prevented a warrant from being obtained in the first place. From what I was told is that they had mentioned that the mail, I think I said the post office confirmed that there was mail sent to Breonna Taylor's house from Jamarcus Glover, who was the main suspect. Now, they had surveillance of Jamarcus Glover going to Breonna Taylor's house and leaving with packages on multiple occasions. So that in and of itself would have been enough. Now, the negligence part and the intention part is where we will find out here into the trial, if they give them a fair trial, is that were they negligent, that they attempt to lie, knowingly lie, to obtain a warrant, or was it a matter of miscommunication? Meaning that somebody may have said, hey, yeah, I'm going to confirm with the post office, and then somebody else believed that it was confirmed. And so they had mentioned it in a search warrant full of a whole bunch of other stuff. And I want you to understand that. Tatum Report, we have it exclusively. You go to TatumReport.com and then you click on Breonna Taylor. Just search Breonna Taylor. I think I'll have my people put it at the front because people are going to need to see this. You can read the whole investigation. It's 40 pages. It has pictures, poll cam pictures. It has audio from the jail. So when Breonna Taylor was communicating with Jamarcus Glover in the past, it has the communication between Jamarcus Glover and other people, family members, even her mother with Jamarcus Glover, I believe. Currently, her boyfriend, who was initially booked into the jail because he shot at the police first, and then they ended up determining that it was inconclusive of whether or not he heard the police, so they claimed that it was relatively self-defense. But his phone calls with other family members and phone calls with other people regarding Breonna Taylor is all transcribed in that document that I'm telling you guys about. So when you read it, you will see that is unequivocal evidence that Breonna Taylor was knee-deep in this conspiracy of selling drugs and all kind of other stuff. I wouldn't call it conspiracy. This drug ring that was going on, which her mother. This is the funny thing. In the document, you'll read it. Her mother is on a jail phone call, saying that we need to get back to the trap house. Pretty much saying the drugs ain't gonna sell themselves. We need to get back to the trap house because they hit the trap house with a warrant. And then after all arrests were made, like 2 weeks later, they arrested people again in the trap house for selling dope. Breonna Taylor's mother is involved, and this is, let me just put the allegedly on there because I don't want nobody suing me, but I have the information, but I'll just say allegedly just in case they want to come after me. Allegedly, Breonna Taylor's mother is involved in like a motorcycle gang. These people, they lied to you and said Breonna Taylor was an EMT. She wasn't. They lied to you to say that Breonna Taylor was randomly sleeping in her bed and the cops got a fake warrant or incorrect warrant or whatever they want to call it, and they just barged in her door without knocking and killed her while she was sleeping in bed. That didn't happen, ladies and gentlemen. This was an investigation that went on for a long period of time. Breonna Taylor was also caught up in an investigation with Jamarcus Glover and others after a rental car that she rented had a dead body in it. A young Hispanic male was murdered and was left in the car that she rented. And there's a lot of other stuff that I might have to get my source to come on here, or not my source, but have to get somebody that's privy to the situation to come on and talk about it, because I got people that will talk about it. I just got to make sure legally they can come on and say some of this stuff on the air. But it's so much deeper than what people imagine. And I talked to Sergeant Mattingly, who was shot during this situation. And he told me exactly what they saw at the door. He told me exactly what they did. They did knock on the door. They did announce. There was a witness that heard them announce, that testified to it, or at least he wrote in a statement that he did. He was afraid to follow up because they were afraid of Breonna Taylor's family. Not necessarily that guy, but I'm assuming that the other people were afraid of their family because her family was well known in that area. She was guilty of being involved with a thug. And they had every right to go in her house. They had all the evidence they needed. And this is a nuance in the affidavit for the warrant. And that's what they're trying to hang them up on. The bottom line is that they want justice, quote unquote, for Breonna Taylor. You know, I'm not saying justice was served because I don't necessarily think she deserved to die. But when you shoot at the police and you're involved in this criminal activity, bad things happen to you. You become victim of things that you may not intend to be a victim of. When you got your boyfriend and when you go look at social media pictures, they have guns and drugs and all kind of stuff. Her boyfriend who shot the police, they couldn't find evidence that he had committed crimes. But also, it took them a long time to get into the apartment after Breonna Taylor was shot. He didn't come out immediately. There is no evidence to disprove that he may have flushed drugs down the toilet. After she shot and everything went on, he didn't come out for a very long period of time. He could have been flushing drugs, hiding evidence. And people were saying, well, there was no money, there was no drugs found in her apartment. We don't know if he flushed the drugs. There was other things found at the apartment. And let me add this to the investigation because people are going to come out with all kind of theories, but you guys are going to be up to speed on it. One of the things that people don't understand is that after Breonna Taylor was shot and killed, it turned into a homicide investigation. Therefore, the prioritizing of searching for drugs and indicia of a crime was thrown out of the window as they proceeded with the warrant for investigation or an investigation into the homicide that occurred. And people may not know that. So after they did that and they were able to come back, you know, they probably didn't, all the evidence could have been destroyed. It was a moot point at that juncture. Ron from San Antonio, Texas, welcome to the Officer Tatum Show.
Thank you for having me. I just have one quick question for you. What are the rules of engagement when the police show up at the door of a residence and they're fired upon? What are the rules of engagement? Are they able to shoot back, not knowing who's inside the residence?
Yeah, so your question that's a great question. There's a multitude of explanations. So all warrants aren't created equal. So if you get a warrant to enter into somebody's residence by force, they will grant you a warrant to barge into somebody's residence, or you can get a no-knock exception, which you can then use to barge in without knocking or without warning. Sometimes they have a warrant for a person's house and they won't barge in. It's too unsafe. They'll try to get a warrant for the person's house. They'll come. They'll try to negotiate with them. It depends on the level of the criminal. Now, if you're fired upon outside of the residence and you have no access to see who's inside and you have no knowledge of who's inside, you cannot fire back. You have to egress, you have to take cover, and then they'll call out the SWAT and then hostage negotiation, and then it'll go from there on. If you are in the residence conducting a warrant and somebody fire at you, you have the right to return fire in order to preserve life.
So what happened in the Taylor case? Were they inside the residence or outside the residence?
Yep, so in the Breonna Taylor case, they obtained a warrant with a no-knock exception, right? And so let me explain this. The no-knock exception, you can choose to use the no-knock exception or you can choose not to use the no-knock exception. They were granted multiple warrants for different locations, and all of them came with the no-knock exception because they were looking for a specific person called Jamarcus Glover. Whichever resident he was in, they were going to use the no-knock exception with the SWAT team and execute the warrant. Breonna Taylor was a low-level criminal, and so they did not use the no-knock exception. They decided to knock and announce and then force entry. And once they forced entry, as soon as they got into the door after knocking and announcing, they were shot by Breonna Taylor's boyfriend. They were shot at by Breonna Taylor's boyfriend. Sergeant Mattingly was struck in the leg. He went down in the doorway. They returned fire after he shot at them. Unfortunately, Breonna Taylor was in the middle of that gunfire exchange, and she passed away.
So they were inside the residence when they were shooting. The police
they were in the door. They were in the doorway of the residence. I think they may have broke the plane of the doorway when they encountered fire from Breonna Taylor's boyfriend. So they were legally in the bounds to return fire on the subject.
Because they were in the doorway. And
well, just because the fact
they were shooting at.
Right, and another thing is that they necessarily didn't have to be in the doorway. If they had the door open and they hadn't break the threshold of the doorway, the guy still couldn't shoot police officers in that moment. So the fact that he shot them, they had a chance to return fire. It was a, you know, it's a legal, it's somewhat of an obligation to return fire on them to protect the life of other people. And unfortunately, Breonna Taylor was in the middle of that, and so they can't make the bullets go around Breonna Taylor, so she ended up getting hit.
Right, but what if there had been other people in there? Were they still in their legal right to return fire?
Yes, yes, it would have been unfortunate because technically, when you shoot a person, you have to hit the target. You know, there's a grace period from that, right? You shoot at the target, maybe the bullets go through and through, and hit other people. That's kind of goes with the territory. They can return fire. Some rounds may be missed, but as long as they're firing at a target in which they believe is a threat, they can then return fire.
So those are the rules of engagement. If they're fired upon and they see the suspect, they can return fire on that suspect.
Yes.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you, Roy. Appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Officer Tatum Show. I want to continue the conversation that I was having with Joe from Atlanta, Georgia, and he had made mention that police officers consider to call criminals that they have a warrant for to get them to turn themselves in and come out of the house peacefully and different things like that. And I want people to understand that, like, we have to talk within reason of these situations. It sounds good to do that, but there's certain parameters, right? If a police officer, because you got to think, a cop don't just wake up one day and say, I think Johnny is selling dope. There's a huge investigation that goes into it, right? There's surveillance. Johnny is selling dope to informants. They got him on poll cam. They got him on recording. They got audio, video evidence, and testimony against this particular person. Once they get all the information they need that this person is a drug dealer or what this person is running a drug ring or a pedophile ring, they then get a warrant for that person's arrest. And if the residence is also has evidence of a crime in it, they have to get a warrant to search the resident. When you get a warrant, you can only search the places that are on the warrant unless you see things in plain sight. So a detective has to go through all of these processes to establish probable cause and establish what we call an affidavit that they write, which is a statement of facts that they write on a warrant, and a judge has to approve the warrant. Now, there's multiple ways you can execute a warrant. If you have a guy that you know is living in a house with multiple children, you will not conduct a no-knock warrant on the house. You would not conduct a knock and breach warrant or whatever you want to call it. You won't do it at the house. Many times we catch the person out on a traffic stop, or we catch them at a location. We set them up with an informant, and we get them away from the location, and we conduct the warrant. If a person is in a house and we know that we don't want them to go mobile, which means we don't want a violent criminal with tendencies to take you on a high-speed chase and shoot it out with the police, take people hostage, you don't want him mobile. So you know he's at the house. We have information that he's there by himself. How do we find that information out? We have informants. We have UCs that go, they look at the house, they observe the house. They have to be 100% sure that there's no children involved in the house before they execute a warrant in which they're going to force entry. And so if they find evidence that the person is alone, they have to document a lot of that stuff in the affidavit of service. Now there is, sometimes you may be wrong, you know, but by and large, if a person has children that normally stays at the house, or they may have custody of children, those things are factored into account before we execute a warrant on somebody's house. Now, here's the difference between calling a person before we execute a warrant, actually calling a person out through hostage negotiation after we execute a warrant, and a no-knock warrant. So the first one is that many people that are not violent criminals, we catch them on traffic stops or whatever the case may be, or we have a warrant for their arrest, but we catch them out on traffic, or we catch them at an event, we catch them with an informant, or we do call them and say, hey, do you want to turn yourself in, if we believe they're not a flight risk and all of the other stuff. That happens rarely. Then you have the person who you conduct the warrant on, but that person becomes violent, or it becomes a situation of a hostage situation or a barricaded subject situation. We have an entire team of professional hostage negotiators that come out and attempt to communicate with people before we just barge into their house, right? We have technology, and many of these major police departments have technology. Like, we have things that we can throw through the window that'll drive around in your house. You can pick it up. It's like a phone. You can pick it up. You can talk to the hostage negotiators. They throw phones in the house. We use robots. We have a lot of technology. We have family call. We try to call their cell phone, and we get a professional on the line that will do what we call a hostage negotiation. I tell you what, a lot of times those negotiations go well. We convince the person to come out. We give them incentives to come out. All of the above occurs before we breach their house because we don't want cops to die and we don't want them to die. Now, there's another level of what we call violent criminals, meaning people that have already murdered other people. They've shot it out with the police before. They're anti-police. They have the propensity for violence. Now, we don't just say, oh, this person is violent, we'll never execute a warrant on that person because they're violent. So we just let them live and conduct violence and commit crimes until they get tired. That's not how it works. So when you get a no-knock exception, you have to then articulate very clearly that this is your intent and this is why. And a police agency or police department doesn't verify the warrant, meaning that they don't give you the right to execute. You have to present that to a judge or a magistrate, and that judge will read the affidavit and determine that you have sufficient information to breach or to conduct a no-knock. If you don't have evidence in your warrant that there is no children present and there is no reason to believe anybody else is at the house but the suspect or the suspects, a judge will not grant you a no-knock exception because it becomes too risky. It becomes too risky and there's not enough information. Let me say this too about verifying addresses. You know, you're not going to call a suspect and say, hey, Tony, do you really live at this address? And if you do, I want you to come outside and get in the back of the police car and you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life. Are you okay with that? That's not going to go well. Johnny is not going to pick up the phone and say, hey, my address is XYZ. I'll leave the door open for you guys. Come on in. I got coffee for you and donuts. That's not going to happen. People are not, they're not in that position for no reason. So we have a process in which, and I can't disclose all of it, but we have a process that we go through that verify the address. We don't just say, I think he lives there. We have evidence, we have pictures, we do other means in which we verify before we hit your house. And also we have phone records, we have electric bills, we have witness statements, we have informants. Sometimes we breach doors with informants in there. Depending on what the situation is. So we have a lot of verification process. That's why you don't see a lot of people getting killed in no-knock warrants why you don't see a lot of people getting killed. Sometimes there's mistakes that happen. But when we do that, we have a tactical SWAT team that's well-trained, and majority, I would say 99% of our no-knock warrants go perfectly well. I mean, I say perfectly well. They don't involve killing people that don't need to be killed. And that is because we're well-trained. We go at a certain time where they least expect it. By the time we breach the door and we get to the suspect, they have no idea what happened to them. They have no idea. We're in their house, diversionary devices. We're coming in a way in which they don't expect us to come. We got SWAT operators in the building or in the house, 5, 6 to 10 that's in there within seconds. And before you wake up and open your eyes and realize that this is not a dream, they already got you. You're already in custody. Now, if somehow you got a gun and you shoot them on the way in, you're going to take a L, more than likely. Now, I know that the caller called in and was wondering about or inquiring about police hitting people's houses late at night, and because people don't expect the cops to be there, that they may end up shooting police officers. Now, let me say this. Breonna Taylor knew that she was involved in what she was involved in. She had visited Jamarcus Glover multiple times in jail before this happened. He had come to her house to pick up drugs in the mail from her house on multiple occasions. He was actually driving. She actually went to the trap house. All this evidence is on the Tatum report. She actually was seen going to the trap house multiple times, which is where Jamarcus Glover, guns, drugs, and many of the criminals involved in the criminal enterprise were at the time of the execution of the warrant. So she knew exactly what was going on. And they make the excuse that, oh, they didn't know, but the police actually announced before they ever breached the door. And if you look at the transcript, the boyfriend said, who is it? So they clearly heard them outside of the door, and they actually responded to the police officers. But then for some reason, he still shot at the police officers, and Breonna Taylor got caught up in the middle of it and died. Most people are not you and I. that are just sleeping in your house and some police officer breached your door and now you're shocked. That most people that we conduct no-knock warrants on are not that person. They know exactly what's about to happen. They got surveillance. They put cameras up. They do everything to prevent from getting caught by the SWAT team. So just to answer the caller's question, I would argue 99% of the people that we breach and we go in their house through a no-knock warrant, they know exactly what the deal is. And they're prepared to flush drugs. They're prepared to shoot it out with the police. They're prepared to do it all. That's why we do it the way we do it. Hold the phone. I'll be back after the break.